I'm going to welcome everyone, SF Big community and beyond. Thank you for joining us today. We are super excited to talk about esports. I'm going to talk very shortly and then pass it on over to Mike Parker, who is moderating the panel. Just so everyone knows, some housekeeping. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll be doing a really awesome panel for about 40-45 minutes. Then we'll do a Q&A at the end, and then we'll wrap up. So this should be a really exciting hour. Mike Parker, Global President at iCrossing, probably needs no introduction to our community here. He's gonna be our awesome moderator. And a little side note, he is a former president of SF Big, so we're really excited to have him and the rest of the panel. So Mike, go ahead and take it away.
Right on. Thank you, Bessie. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and appreciate that intro. Yeah, I'm Mike Parker. I run a global digital agency called iCrossing, and once upon a time I was the president of SF Big. So very glad to be here and be part of this opportunity today. And thank you to Bessie and thank you to SF Big for continuing to try to provide great opportunity and content as we go through this challenging and unprecedented time. It's great to be able to pull everybody together. I'm super excited. As some of you guys probably heard a little bit of the banter as you were signing on, we have an awesome panel today around a really interesting topic, and that is esports and gaming and the rise of this new form of entertainment and pulling together huge audiences very rapidly. So we've been really lucky to be able to pull together some industry leaders who bring different perspectives from their background and their role in the sort of ecosystem of esports. So we have a lot to learn, a lot to share today. We'll have some fun. Well, we're all kind of sheltering in place here together. Certainly for an old guy like me, I'm probably the oldest guy on the panel here, the most gray hair anyway, but you know, it's just been phenomenal to see this meteoric rise of not only gaming, but of esports in more recent years, into a real significant phenomenon. We know, I think a lot of us as marketers, that gaming as a category has surpassed movies and other forms of entertainment in terms of global participation and the amount of dollars, you know, that we're sort of talking about. So it has become a really key pillar of the content, attention, entertainment ecosystem. And I think a lot of questions remain, and probably many of you, like I do, have questions about what does that mean as marketers? What does that mean to brands? How do we, you know, what do we need to know? And how do we potentially participate on behalf of the brands we represent? You know, a few interesting data points for me. The data suggests that more than 400 million people will watch esports this year. And obviously, I think with the COVID situation and people being at home having more time on their hands, that's probably fueling that number to be even potentially higher. Data suggests that over $1 billion of revenue will be generated across the ecosystem. Doc's going to introduce himself in a moment, but more than 280 colleges now have esports teams officially as part of the college program. So it's truly become a mainstream and global phenomenon. So worth our while knowing more about it. Let's get into it. Let's have some fun. I'd like to start off by giving each of our panelists a quick minute to introduce themselves and talk about you know, the role that they play in the business and the ecosystem. Brandon, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here, and thank you to SF Big for having us. Brandon Byrne. I started out with a career in accounting and finance, sort of in a regular job. And as a lifelong gamer, I actually got a job as the VP of finance for a company called Curse. We were one of the very first esports teams in the world, really big in World of Warcraft, League of Legends, things of this nature. This was about a decade ago. After that, I became the CFO for one of the largest esports teams in the world, Team Liquid. Helped them raise some money for a couple of years. And then after that, I started a company called Opera Event that is in the influencer media space and have been doing that ever since.
Thanks, Brennan. Will, great to have you here today. You want to give a quick background? I think people probably know something about your background, but you want to remind us how you're involved in this industry?
I'm an entertainer. I spent the first half of my life as an actor. I'm spending the second half of my life as a writer and as the host of a show called Game Master, which is an upcoming esports reality competition show that would have been completed if not for the pandemic, will be in production as soon as it is safe to get back into production. I am here today because we are hoping to be one of the, if not the premier esports destination programs. We hope to bring to the esports world what the most popular kind of reality programs have brought to their various genres over the last maybe decade or so. And mostly what I'm here to do today is to maybe share a few thoughts as someone who is a consumer in this space, and really to learn as much as I can from all of you, because you have much more experience in esports than I do.
Thanks, Will. Great to have you. Marco, you want to give us a bit of your background?
Sure. So just shooting way back, I spent about 10 years as an attorney before deciding in 2009 to throw in the towel on that and to pursue something that I was very passionate about, which is the game industry. I moved into gaming in 2009, running one of the largest browser-based games in the world at that time. It was called Ebony. Shortly after that, I started my career path of starting companies. I founded a company called Gamelr, which is one of the first independent mobile game publishing platforms back in 2013. Shortly after that, I had a company called Rooster in 2015, which was the first time we built a platform that YouTube influencers could do performance-based marketing deals directly with mobile game publishers without the need for an MCN or an agent. And that was the first time that had ever really been done. And then about 2 years ago, I started my most recent company, which is called Framerate. Framerate is the largest gaming, Instagram's social video brand out there, where we basically take all the best highlights from all the best players all around the world that get submitted to us, and we feature them on networks where a lot of these gamers and users are now spending a lot of their time, like Instagram and TikTok. And that company was acquired by Super League Gaming last year, and I'm currently a senior vice president for content distribution for Super League Gaming.
Awesome. Darin, you want to jump in and give us your background?
Yeah, I've been gaming since I was 3 years old. Love video gaming since my sisters tricked me into passing over the controller in Super Mario Brothers when they said, "Hey, jump down that hole, you'll get an extra life." And I died, and they took the controller away from me. So it's been a lifelong vendetta, chip on my shoulder. And got into esports about almost 10 years ago, volunteering at Leaguepedia, doing a lot of League of Legends content. Eventually moved over to managing editor of content at Azubu, which was a streaming platform at the time, and then jumped ship to ESPN about 4.5 years ago, and have been was responsible at the start for helping laying the foundation of everything that you kind of see today. And the team has grown, and now we have a lot of different departments working on a lot of different things.
Nice. Great to have you. Doc, see you in your Boise State polo and some kind of technology-laden setup behind us. Why don't you explain where you're at and what you do?
You bet. I'm Dr. Chris Haskell. Please call me Doc. That's what my mom actually calls me. So people are like, really? Yeah. Usually when I do something stupid, that's really when it is. But I'm the head coach and director of Boise State Esports. We are a Division I program, one of about 280, maybe 300 pretty soon here, collegiate varsity esports programs. I have about 60 varsity student athletes, and we compete and broadcast here in our arena over 200 times per semester. And so we're in the steep of it. It's pretty cool.
Nice. Well, hopefully, audience, as you can see, we have an incredible panel here who all represent sort of diverse perspectives on this industry. So really looking forward to being able to share everyone's expertise together. So let's get into it, guys. Firstly, for those people who, like myself, maybe aren't experts in the space, certainly know something about its incredible rise and popularity, but who could use a little bit of a history lesson, a little bit more context, a bit more background. Brandon, as somebody who's really been a pioneer and seen the journey of the industry, do you want to start us off and maybe give us a little bit of context, kind of how things have evolved and where we're at in the stage of development of esports now?
Sure, yeah. Esports goes back a real long way. I actually think the very first game competition happened at Stanford in the early 70s. There was a bigger competition for Space Invaders that Atari held in 1980. And then, you know, the world was off to the races, right? So it was a little bit slow from a perspective, but going back to the days of like Quake and Street Fighter, which were games that were really big. I think actually StarCraft 2 kind of took it to the next level. But believe it or not, all of these things have been developing over the last several of decades. Esports didn't really start to become huge until about, let's call it, you know, 8 or 10 years ago. Right now, in its development, I would say that, you know, we're probably in the bottom of the first inning for esports in general. A lot of this just having to do with the fact that, you know, these are, maturing markets, right? When we talk about things like the birth of, you know, football and baseball back in the day, I can remember reading articles and getting information about people who would play, you know, baseball during the season, and then they were photocopier salesmen, or they were, you know, car salesmen or whatever in the off season, right? And it took a long time for those industries to mature. You know, esports is coming along much, much faster, especially as the publishers start to support that. In 2010, 2011 is when Riot Games started its first, you know, pro league. And we're starting to see the maturation of that process. I think that the last data I saw was close to 400 million people watching esports on an annual basis that came out of Goldman Sachs. So it is an incredibly emerging space. It's very fast growing, and there's a lot of runway in front of it.
It's an interesting, you know, we talk about esports and your analogy of baseball, football, and sports, right? And is this really a sport? Or how are these athletes? You know, Darin, as somebody who works for a brand like ESPN that is now covering this as a sport and as part of the content taking, you know, why talk about maybe a little bit of the job that you do, but why, you know, ESPN would be so interested. You know, we've seen obviously the NBA start their own league, you know, so some of the sports franchises are obviously connecting to esports.
Yeah.
Talk about the place that we're at in terms of this as a sport, or thinking about this type of analogous to sports that we know and love.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to kind of tee off of that. And the first one is if anyone's asking you the question, is esports a sport? They're asking the wrong question. Like, we've moved past that 5, 6, 7 years ago. No one cares if it's a sport or not. It's a competition, it's entertaining, it's engaging, and there's an audience there that is hungry for it. And that's really one of the big reasons ESPN, Yahoo, and we also launched 4.5 years ago, and a bunch of other, you know, Washington Post covers esports to a certain extent. A lot of these companies want to get in on esports and coverage because there's a young, affluent, intelligent audience that is basically the next generation of consumers. You know, the last 20, 30 years, we all grew up with traditional sports, NBA, NFL. And that audience it isn't going to go away. People are like, sports are still ingrained in a lot of our culture, but as new platforms and new hobbies arise, there becomes more opportunity for people to capitalize on new audiences, you know, and to kind of point to Will, tabletop gaming and the rise of tabletop gaming. I was really introduced to that through Will's YouTube show, Tabletop. And that was really, for me, my introduction to tabletop gaming. A lot of people's introduction to esports and competitive gaming and streaming is something like Twitch, or all the channels and brands that engage on Twitch, such as our ESPN Esports channel. So it's really about capturing new audience and delivering that engaging original content on a global scale, because esports, you have to think of esports as a global thing, because it really has exploded because of the ability for people to access internet either through their mobile device or computer at home, or a PC bong in South Korea.
I know, Marco, you've had some experience in kind of representing people and thinking about athletes, and certainly something, Darin, that you cover. But, you know, one of the things I thought fascinating in some of the conversations we've been having is this idea of two-sport athletes. Like, who are these athletes? And are, in some cases, they're actually athletes that we know from other sports. but the growth of, you know, personalities or people profile behind athletes. Can you talk a little bit about who some of the competitors are, and how some people who may already have an athletic career or sort of a brand behind them are getting into this as well?
Yeah, sure. And really quickly, just to dovetail off of Darin's last point, I mean, if you were to look at the average age of a sports viewer, from the very top, you've got sports like the PGA, horse racing. I think the MLB is next in terms of oldest average viewer age. And then you get down to the NBA, UFC, WWE. But once you hit 30 and below, it's pretty much all esports and gaming. And that's why almost every major pro sports team owner or people that have a vested interest in sports like ESPN are all focused on esports, because they understand that that group is only going to get older and larger, and younger people will come up beneath them. And that's esports is what they're focused on, right? So a lot of the athletes that are currently playing in the NFL and the NBA and the NHL and the PGA Tour, lots of different pro sports leagues, they're all in that age demographic where they grew up playing video games very, very passionately. So what you're really starting to see now is the modern day two-way athlete, where back in the day we had Bo Jackson, who would play baseball and football. We had Michael Jordan, who would play basketball and baseball. And now what you have are NBA players like Gordon Hayward, or NFL players like Kyle Van Noy that are currently professional athletes, but they're also very high-level competitive gamers that take it very seriously. They stream, they have production teams, they care about this stuff. They have sponsors both on the field and on stream, right? So it's become a huge area of interest for them. Almost every major esports team has some level of investment from at least one major athlete in some way, shape, or form. So there's a lot of parallels there. And I think a lot of the brands that are accustomed to working in the sports field should be in esports already. And if they haven't been, then they should strongly be considering it.
Anybody want to add on to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's exactly right. There's data that suggests that it's actually easier to get to African Americans and Latino millennials and Gen Z in esports than traditional sports by a factor of 2x. So yeah, I think Mark is 100% correct. A lot of the big regular traditional sports are investing in esports because they see this as a way to start to capture the attention of the people who are in their teens, 20s, and all the way up until about 30 to 35 years old.
Yeah, and from a marketer's perspective, and if you're trying to reach this demographic, which is a very valuable audience and demographic, I mean, gamers, from a marketing perspective, do really three things primarily. They play games, they watch other people play games, and they watch Netflix. And if you're not getting to them on one of those three platforms, you're probably going to have a very hard time reaching them.
I think it's interesting to point out too that this generation, the generation you're talking about, craves a much tighter transactional distance. They like their stars, their influencers to feel like they're in the room with them. I mean, historically, the only time you get a interaction with Brad Pitt is at the checkout stand on a tabloid, but people can tune into Will's show and feel like they're sitting at the table with him. All of these technologies, Twitch included, and YouTube, bring the fan into the world of, and can comment when it's a live stream, and even garner some interaction that way. They feel like they're a part of it.
I feel like in the esports world, the distance between the passionate fan and the professional athlete is smaller than in any other professional sporting league. And that's really significant.
Yeah, I was actually gonna comment on that specifically, because when we launched at ESPN, a lot, we never had like an uphill battle. It's like, because it's a very traditional sports-minded area at ESPN, but people were like, "Why? What is the difference? Why do people watch this? Why do people?" And it's exactly what Will just said, is that if I'm watching the best League of Legends player play on his stream, that's the same as watching LeBron practice three-pointers in his home stadium or in his backyard. You can engage with that person, which is a double-edged sword, because it opens you up to trolls and scrutiny and whatever. But it's also one of the really positive and unique things of a stream. So there's that part of it. And then also like why people watch. It's a marketing tool. That's why people like League of Legends, they'll never say, oh, we're going to be Twitch exclusive. Like Mixer, people can stream on Mixer, on YouTube, on Facebook. League of Legends would shoot themselves in the foot if they said, we're only going to be Twitch exclusive, because that's just narrowing the audience, right? They want to reach as many people as possible. So if I'm watching Bjergsen play League of Legends on a Sunday and I see him using a skin for a champion that I like, number one, I'm inspired to go play League of Legends the same way I was inspired watching Brett Favre throw a football on Sundays growing up. I would want to go throw the football afterwards. So, but I'm inspired to go play video games after I'm watching a tournament because I'm like, that was really cool. I think I'm going to go try that, or I'm going to go buy that skin because that was cool. So it's also, as much as it's great competition and great entertainment and great to watch these pros, it's also a marketing funnel as a whole.
Well, that's the important thing that I would say for brands, and I think this is the big difference. The way you could summarize what we just talked about here is that instead of this being a monologue where entertainment is flowing one way, it's a dialogue, right? We're not talking about just watching TV. We're talking about what really could be better defined as a community. Not only do you have something in common with the person who's creating the content, you also have something in common with the people who are chatting alongside of you, and you often find yourself playing games with those people. So it is the difference between a narrative that's coming one way and a community type environment.
Well, maybe as somebody, you're obviously, you've been connected to the entertainment and the content space for a long time, and you sort of made that bridge as from an entertainer and sort of linear into this space. You're building content, you're building community around that content, you're building fans. How do you sort of think about your audience and engaging with them, and as you're looking to build your businesses?
As it relates primarily to tabletop, which is where I have a lot of experience, we didn't really build an audience as much as we nurtured a community. And that was extremely important to us. Nice background. It was very important to us because when tabletop started, there were already YouTube streamers doing playthroughs of games, but nobody was really doing it in a way that mirrored traditional sports television with OTF interviews and replays and graphic overlays and things like that. And these guys are amazing. I love them, and I've learned so much from them. I used their videos when I was researching how to make my show, but they're speaking to a really specific audience. There's nothing wrong with that. But these guys are, and it's always men, are always speaking to other men exactly like them, which means we presume a knowledge of the game. We presume an intensity of competition. We approach it in a way that really turns off casual fans, that turns off women, that turns off people who are not white dudes. And what I wanted to do with tabletop was show what I knew to be true. The gaming world is amazingly diverse. And this small group of gatekeepers are not representative of the hobby. They're not representative of the extraordinary players. And this exists in esports as well. It is no secret that there is a very toxic underbelly to the esports world, and it's not welcoming, and it's misogynist, and it's not great. One of the things I hope to do with Game Master is similar to what we did with tabletop, right? Where we say, listen, this is a huge world. It's super diverse. You are not a dick. You love this world. You don't have to go into this world and engage with people who are crappy to you. You can engage with this world in a way that's really positive and really inclusive and has a low barrier to entry. If we are able to accomplish that with Game Master, I will feel like we have helped build a community and helped feed the existing community and nurture the existing community in the same way we did that with tabletop games. I hope that 5 years from now, I'll be on a call with somebody who's saying, man, I was just so turned off by esports, but I saw how inclusive you made it, and I felt like it was a place where I could be welcome, and now it is my biggest hobby.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great mission, Will. Switching gears, as we think about the people that participate and Doc, the rise of the idea of competition on a college level and kind of organizing that in the curriculum and the teams around leading colleges. Can you talk a little bit about, how you approach that and the kind of the rise of the college dimension of esports?
You bet. I've said this many times, but this is the greatest scam I've ever perpetrated. I'm a professor and a head coach of video games. It is not dissimilar in any way from what those of you who've played any sport at any level would expect. Our world for video games is like the athletic world. We organize, we try out, we plan, we practice together. There are plays, legitimate full playbooks that we prepare to compete together. We watch film, ours and other people's. We game plan for people, and then we see what that preparation did for us. And we do that. Will makes a really interesting point. We do that in a very co-ed way. It's a very inclusive way. It's a sports world where your size, your weight, your speed has far less to do with your ability to learn, react, play a role, communicate. All of those things every human can learn, and it's honing that in our college students. But we come to college, if you think about it, we come to college so that we can really level up. We can move to the next stage of our Pokemon-like evolution. We don't necessarily come here to be professional gamers, and our students are becoming electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, music teachers, those kinds of things, and they get to do what they love, just like 99% of all football players, basketball players, volleyball players who come to college to be a part of the university fabric and provide people the opportunity to access their talent, the thing that they're really good at. And so, people are like, oh, that is the strangest job ever. It's exactly like every other thing that you imagine in college athletics. And add to that, I'm in our arena here. We broadcast every single one of our matches, 200 plus per semester. And when people are like, well, that's neat and all, let me throw this out. We had 1.1 million viewers. You talk about 400 million viewers in esports. We had 1.1 million since January. Over 6.5 million minutes watched. That's something that Will would probably appreciate with his channel. People are flocking to this production of what we do in the way that they are starting to wane in other types of college athletic participation. And we're the only program on campus that finished our competitive season in the spring, and everything else had to close down because we can maintain all parts of this from a distance. So college esports is just part of the esports ecosystem, but it kind of highlights what works well. It's lots and lots of voices in this space. It is not exclusive, it is inclusive, and people are watching like crazy.
I think
so. Doc, in addition to like playing in the teams, is there curriculum being developed? Are people thinking about careers and participating? Are colleges thinking about how to help people participate in the industry?
Yeah, they are. If you take football as an example, there are careers built in and around football, but football players don't play football just to become professionals, but they do have the opportunity to take on different roles, different responsibilities, and learn ins and outs of that industry. Some want to go on and teach and maybe coach high school because they love the game. Others go into medicine or go into management. There's lots of unique ways. Folks, high quality super wrestler like Darin found his way into journalism, which is ancillary to the sport that he was so good at.
You're making me blush.
We can't see through that beard.
I wanted to jump in real quick on just the two things that Will and Doc had just kind of talked about. The same way that Will wants to make Game Master inclusive, the way that Tabletop made it inclusive to be like tabletop gaming, and the same way that Doc is bringing in all walks of life through the collegiate space. We've known this for a long time because we're all lifelong gamers of different walks of life. Gaming is cool. It's cool to be a game like a gamer. And when I watch tabletop, I realized, oh, it is cool to talk about tabletop games. And when I watch Twitch, I finally realized, oh, it is kind of cool to go out and find like-minded people. There are millions and millions and millions of people who want to talk about video games and esports, and it's just a really, it's more accepting than not, because you're going to have the spiral of silence. You're going to have people in chat and trolls and being mean or whatever, but more people than not are welcoming and excited, and we've all known it for years. And now you see athletes and Xavier Woods and Amon Green and Gordon Hayward, like, they're just like us, right? We knew that. They're just like us, but like now Snoop Dogg's out there having a blunt while he's playing Madden or whatever. Like, it's cool to be a gamer. So I just wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah. Well, good segue. I think, obviously one of the key things that we set up here that our audience is really interested in hearing more about, I think, is getting into how brands can participate, whether it's with, a league like yours, Doc, or on a show, Will, like yours, but how do brands, and Marco, with your background, maybe you can kind of lead us into this part of the discussion, but we as marketers, as for example, the rise of social media channels, had to think a lot about, what is this community, and how do you enter into it, and how do you enter into it into an authentic way, or the right way, so you don't get rejected by the community. But Marco, maybe set us up a little bit in terms of how should brands and marketers be thinking about the different channels and the different ways to participate?
Yeah, I mean, this can be a complicated dilemma for a lot of brands that are not familiar with the space. They don't know, should we align with a player, a team, a game, a league, Twitch? Like, who should we align with? Where do we enter the space? If we don't know what we're doing, we make a mistake, can we ever recover? Then, the internet's forever. Gamers never forget. So, like, if you're not, and this is probably the number one rule I would be faithful to if I was a brand, is authenticity is paramount. Okay, the gaming audience is not going. Influencer marketing is great. But at this point in the life cycle of influencer marketing, you've got to have authenticity with your audience. And I think what it's really about is looking at all of the different people, whether it's a player, a team, a league, an org that has an audience, and you want to reach that audience. Which of those individuals or teams or orgs or games most aligns with your brand authentically, and that you think will be well received by them, right? So that's really step number one, is focusing on entering in an authentic way, and then understanding that it may take some level of investment and time to build up trust with the gaming community. But once gamers trust you and they feel like they like your product, or they've been exposed to it in a positive, non-pushy way, they're the most loyal spending game consumer you're going to find between 18 and 35. Gaming is recession proof. I've never seen gaming, not be a popular place, not seeing games fly off the shelves. Viewership for every network is through the roof right now because everyone's watching games. So it's an audience you very much want to be marketing to, and to get a feel for your products for, but you've got to do it the right way. You can't just write a big check to somebody and expect them to tell everyone that they like your product. That's not going to work. And the second thing I would say is gaming in 2020 is much more than just YouTube and Twitch. That's something we discovered very early on with Instagram and Framerate, is that many of this younger, more diverse, more inclusive generation of gamers that is less focused on the hardcore esports of 10 or 15 years ago, and more focused on being social with their friends and having a good time and seeing events and having good experiences. They're on platforms like Instagram. They're on platforms like TikTok. They're on a lot of different networks where you can reach them very effectively, right? So it's important to I think, diversify and not hit the same people over and over again, and really, reach gamers on the platforms where they like to watch content. Those are really like the top two that I would start off with.
May I just piggyback onto something Marco just said? I have been the influencer in that influencer marketing equation several times. And I've had some very successful campaigns and some extraordinary partnerships and some real disappointing and frustrating experiences. And for everyone who is on this call today, who is involved in brands and involved in marketing, if there's one thing you take away from someone who does this with you frequently, when you come to us with an idea and we say, listen, 80% of this idea is great, but this 20% is going to turn my audience off. It's going to hurt us all. And you insist on us doing that 20% because you had a lot of meetings and you had a lot of whiteboards and you did a lot of market research. But I know my community. When you don't listen to me, what you're doing is setting money on fire, because I'll take your money, but you're not going to get the results that you want because you're not engaging with us where we are. Yeah. That is so unbelievably important. If you're going to talk to I don't like the term influencer. It feels kind of weird and gross to me, but because that's the language we agree on, I'm going to use it. If you're going to talk to an influencer's audience and you're going to go through that influencer and you don't listen to that influencer about how they interact with their audience, you are just setting money on fire. And it is a giant mistake.
Go ahead.
It's a troubadour thing. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, this goes back to the community thing. And one of the things that we want to talk about here is, you know, when you're a brand and you're coming into this space, which is actually, it's really hard to do. I think Marco's 100% correct. I have seen giant brands come into this space and completely fail, right? I remember Coke did a thing on Twitch where they were helping people to become an affiliate, which is when Twitch turns your monetization on. And like, people were celebrating, oh, I'm a Coke affiliate. This is so cool. And then they stopped doing it. Right. And then so a bunch of people went on Reddit and started making fun of it. And it was like this really disingenuous thing. The thing that you need to do, and it actually works in Will's world, it also works in Doc's world. If you just go and say, hey, I'm here to support Boise State. We're a sponsor and we're just here to support this community. If you go in and say, we're here to help support Tabletop or Will Wheaton or that community, it goes a long way. I think a lot of what's happening now is there's a lot of expertise in marketing that exists in more traditional marketplaces that do not correlate into the social media space. It doesn't work on YouTube. It doesn't work on Twitch. And what we need from brands is for them to start to listen to the people who have had a lot of experience, including guys like Will, including guys like Doc, including guys like Marco, who understand how to reach this community without setting their brand on fire. It's really, really important.
Yeah. Well, one thing, you know, hopefully those of us who'd like to think of themselves as good marketers, you know, I think one of the key lessons, certainly, hopefully, that we've learned over time is you got to understand the community you're trying to talk to in the context and be authentic and do it the right way and not try to force yourself in because it's counterproductive. And I think I echo what all you guys I think are trying to say. You know, I wonder if it might be helpful to just take a beat, Brandon, because one of the things that took me a while to kind of get my head around is, you know, you talk about Twitch or the role of YouTube or these different types of channels, and this community exists in a number of places and ways, and there's probably different roles, you know, for the different channels. Maybe just take a beat and help us understand the sort of ecosystem a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let's just take the example of like a Twitch streamer. Okay. What you'll notice when you're working with a content creator, which maybe is a better term than influencer, is, you know, they don't have the traditional resources of a full-fledged media company, right? So when you have a television show, there's a marketing department and that studio is used to doing XYZ and there's ads on the side of buses. Influencers and content creators don't have those types of resources. And so they wind up using the platforms in different ways. This is really important for brands to understand that they often don't understand. So picture for a moment, let's just take a game like League of Legends, for example. League of Legends is a game where you have 400 different champions, and each champion has its own skill set, its own thing that it does well. And the way it works is I play this champion. I mostly play, let's say, Tryndamere, which is a champion in League of Legends that plays the top lane. And you know what? Every single time I play against a Rumble in the top lane, I just get my ass handed to me. You don't go to Twitch to find a way to fix that problem, right? Like, you're trying to play better at the game. What you do is you use YouTube. YouTube is discovery, right? So you go there, you say, Tryndamere versus Rumble, and you get 800 videos, right? And when you're watching, That's when you see somebody's, a personality come out and you're like, you know what? I like this content creator. I like this girl. I like this guy. And then you go and you watch them on Twitch. Now, Twitch is their community. That's where people talk back and forth, right? Twitter works more like a CRM. It's a re-engagement, right? Once someone's found your community, they follow you on Twitter and you can say, hey, I'm streaming live, or we had a new episode come out. And so what you're seeing, like for, as an example on YouTube, unless you have millions of views, you actually don't make a lot of money there. You make your money on the community side, but you use YouTube and you upload there because that's how you get found. That's how you get discovery. Discovery is the most important thing for content creators in this space. And so you have your discovery mechanism, you have your community, which is where you're interacting with your fans, and the fans are interacting with each other. And then you have something like Twitter, that is for that re-engagement. How do I get somebody to come back and check out my latest video or to watch the community live? All of those things are ways that content creators start to gain a momentum with their audience, right? And this is important for brands to understand as they engage with the different platforms, like, hey, what is this content creator using this for? In the case of, like, say, Will's Tabletop, they were mostly on YouTube, right? Like, I think they had a Twitch channel, but a lot of their audience was on YouTube. And so that formula looked different than someone whose biggest audience and most monetization comes on Twitch, and they're using YouTube for discovery and Twitter for re-engagement. So it's really important to understand community-wise, like, okay, we want to engage with this community. Let's take Boise State, for example. Boise State says, you know what? We want all of our stuff to be streamed live and we want people to watch it. But we're going to take our videos and edit them and then put them on YouTube so people can find us. And then we're going to engage our audience on Twitter to let them know there's a game on Thursday at 6 o'clock. There's a game this Saturday at 10 a.m. And they're going to be using these different tools in different ways. When you engage with Boise as a sponsor, it's really helpful to understand all of those ways so you know which way you ultimately want to engage with them, whether it's on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or so on and so forth.
For what it is worth, everything Brandon just said is exactly how we approached Tabletop. And I mean, Tabletop is the most successful board gaming series in history. And we used those ideas and those methods. We treated YouTube like it was the broadcast television, and we treated Twitch like it was the live stage show. And we approached them with those perspectives, bringing very different motivations and creative styles to each platform. And I think it's really important for brands and for marketers to understand, when we are in those different spaces, audiences have different expectations from how they're going to interact with advertisers and how they're going to interact with the players. And we all have to be cognizant of that so that we are meeting the audience where the audience is at, instead of trying to force them into a place where we can get them to give us their money.
Yeah. Well, we're at about the 45-minute mark, guys, and I know we could probably just keep talking for hours and hours amongst this group. It's a fascinating topic that merits a lot more depth of discussion, but we are getting a ton of questions in, and I'd love to have an opportunity here to kind of have us address some of the things that the audience is asking. Kind of building on where we've just gone in this topic area. So Jim is a game player and talks about playing Fortnite and Apex and watching, and this is something we talked about yesterday on our call, the Travis Scott Fortnite integration and the Star Wars event with J.J. Abrams on Fortnite. And I think those are some of the more higher profile brand interactions that have sort of happened over the last while. Interested in getting the panel's point of view on, were those done right? Are those in fact good examples of brand activations? And does anybody have any context around the order of magnitude of cost of those types of brand programs at this point?
I have a general thought about just the activation of those and in the community. It revolves right back to I think what is the thesis of this conversation, with is authenticity. If it fits in that universe and it is welcome, then it doesn't feel obtrusive. If it is forced in, it does feel obtrusive, and the audience will just kind of feel yucky about it. I think that was the word that was used. In those cases, I mean, those were really well received. It's a universe and an environment that where your clout is in your emotes, your skins, and influenced a lot of those, which were part of the popular culture. I did wear my Kylo Ren skin yesterday in Fortnite. Wasn't as popular. You know, it's kind of a fashion forward type of space. So those made a lot of sense as integrations. And the John Wick, and there were a bunch of them that Fortnite has done. They've done that really well.
Mike, it also depends on the game. I mean, I think when you talk about games like Fortnite, as well as when you talk about a younger demo game like Roblox, those are more so, I would think of as social networks than actual games themselves. I mean, platforms like Fortnite and Roblox are where kids go to hang out with their friends after school and catch up and do their thing. And, you know, with Fortnite's recent, announcement and launch of Party Royale mode, which doesn't even have any shooting at all. It's just basically a big, map for people to hang out and do social things together and attend concerts together and buy merchandise and open stores. I mean, it's really the best way to think about platforms like that. So when you can buy some real estate in a space like that, I mean, the value is going to be very high to do that. The specific question about costs, these are definitely 7-figure like activations if you want to be able to do them. But I mean, if you had a choice right now to put on a virtual concert in Fortnite or have a Super Bowl commercial, like I'd much rather do an event in Fortnite.
And there's something to be said about outside of the games that we had mentioned, and kind of circling back to the authenticity aspect that we were talking about. The Louis Vuitton and League of Legends skin line that they did for last year's the collaboration that they did was wildly successful. And if you were going to say, what kind of skins do we want to release and collaborate with? If we wanted to do a clothing line, would it be Nike, or would it be Adidas, or would it be something different like Urban Outfitters or Lucky Brand? They went all out. Louis Vuitton. I'm never going to own anything Louis Vuitton, but if I want to own a Louis Vuitton skin in the game, I can do that for cheaper. And it's a funnel for both League of Legends and Louis Vuitton audiences. And at the first part of it, I was like, I don't understand this. I don't get it. And after a few days of talking about it with colleagues and everything, it became wildly clear that this was an intelligently crafted collaboration. And the word authenticity wasn't even tossed. It just felt right, because it was worked on with people who have decades of experience in that game versus decades of experience in their own universe fashion, and they listened to each other and collaborated and said, this is what feels right, and this is how we can do this without overstepping on either side. You can run the lanes parallel and find success in that. And that's what you see in things like Fortnite with their skin collabs and their Avengers events and the Travis Scott and the Star Wars stuff. So I wanted to bring up that authenticity. Authenticity doesn't come up much in our talks at all, because it's not a flash in the pan thing. It's your actions speak louder than words, and your actions are repetition. It's not one off or two off. It's years of doing something.
It's a commitment. Coming back to that topic of sort of flash in the pan or authenticity, one of the questions Tatum asked is, we've seen in recent months, especially this kind of crossover of live sport athletes playing, the video game. So the NBA athletes playing NBA 2K, and that being broadcast or streamed. Is that kind of thing? Is that authentic? Is that sort of a bit of a moment in time thing? Well, we're all home at COVID and we can't actually play the sports. Is that good for the industry as it brings, more attention? Or is that just sort of like a kind of a moment in time thing?
So can I jump in on this?
NBA 2K is like, I want to be LeBron James. Every kid who plays one of those games is like, I want to be one of these great NBA players. If they can turn on TV and see an NBA player they love playing the very same game they play, that's not going away. That's huge. There's such a huge market there for the players. Are you kidding me? They're injured. They're not off the radar. They're injured. Okay, they're not playing on the court. They're playing virtually. They're playing against another player who's also injured. I don't think that that's a flash in the pan at all. I think it is a brand new world that is opening up. And when the pandemic is behind us, that's not going away.
Well, believe it or not, there was actually an episode of Ballers with The Rock where one of the pro athletes wanted to quit and just become a pro esport athlete. And this was before COVID. The reason why this is an interesting question is because there's a disconnect between the audience watching traditional sports and the players. Let me be clear. I think the average age of an audience watching the NFL is like 44 years old. The average player is 26, right? And so what you're seeing is that the pro players who are playing these sports are no different than anybody else who's 22 or 23, 26. They're all playing video games, right?
They're just like us.
They're just like us. So they're sitting there and they're like, I'm 23. I was raised on, whether it was Madden or Minecraft or League of Legends. Like the reason why it feels weird is because the audience is my age, right? I just had a birthday. I turned 47. And the truth is that it was funny to hear Darin say, gaming's cool. Yeah. It's cool now. It didn't used to be cool, right?
Exactly. The stereotype used to be, oh, you're in your mom's basement.
Exactly.
Call of Duty people just being.
I'm like, listen here, young buck. I got in a lot of trouble in junior high school for being a Dungeons and Dragons player and being on the football team at the same time. But let me just say, like these athletes, they're kids, and the kids are all playing these games. And so while I get the audience is like, oh, this is interesting. Is this a flash in the pan? The answer is no, because they're just doing what everyone in their demographic does, which is play video games.
Doc, a question maybe for you. We've always followed along the sort of NCAA, like, do athletes have rights to their likenesses? Should they be compensated for their participation in sports? As you think about your teams on the college level, as you think about monetization, sponsorship, involvement from brands, what have you come across? Is there any interesting learning or observations you have as you've been trying to navigate that kind of the role of the esports athlete on a college level and brand involvement or generating revenue?
You bet. I thought you were going to go the gender one, and I was all excited about that one. Hopefully, we'll get a touch.
We'll go there next.
I'll give this as really simply. We are most concerned about what our students' focus is. If we get too wide as college students, we don't tend to do very well in the thing we like the least, which is usually class. So we're talking about the use of likenesses. I had this conversation with another university this morning where they're like, should we let our students stream and earn money? I'm like, as long as it doesn't affect their schoolwork. I mean, if it's I make a lot of money streaming and I want to go to school, find a way to make that fit together with your university before you try to, and we want you to play competitively for us. So we have an open dialogue with our students about it all the time. And when different opportunities, because there are always new opportunities come up, we want to have that conversation so we can balance okay, so how many hours do you think a week that's going to be, and where's that going to fit for you? And we can kind of phase where we've taken varsity players who were practicing what our NCAA maximum of 20 hours per week, and we rotated them into a supporting role and a occasionally broadcasting role so that they could pursue what had become a very exciting YouTube opportunity. They were making videos and reaching out to people that way, and had gotten very successful in a short amount of time. To keep them connected in school, we have to have those conversations with them because they're here at the university to get an education. If they've got opportunities and they need to take time off, most parents think this is a terrible idea, but college really isn't a 4-year contiguous experience anymore. It's broken into pieces for a lot of people. And so as long as we have a relationship with them and are really guiding them, we can get them to the end of that experience. It may not look like the parents would expect, but we can do both. Did I artfully dodge that question for you?
Yeah.
One thing on the NCAA thing, like no one endemic to esports wants the NCAA to take over anything in the collegiate scene. They don't like the NCAA's chokehold on traditional sports. To me, in this stage, in this scenario of where we are, is just out of touch. And if the NCAA were to come in and say, all right, we're going to regulate League of Legends collegiate play, and the collegiate side of League of Legends or League of Legends as a whole, Riot Games, were like, no, we don't like any of those rules. Oh, they can pull it. This isn't football. This isn't a game that no one owns. This is their game, and if they don't like it, they'll just send a cease and desist. Like, no one can play it in college.
Naismith is not going to come back and patch basketball.
That's right.
There will be no 7-player meta.
This is actually an incredibly valid point. One of the things that we deal with all the time when I'm on panels having mostly to do with esports is, hey, how come esports teams aren't making money, right? The biggest problem that esports has right now is that we took a traditional sports model and superimposed it over that. But the biggest problem you have is that the teams don't own the league, right? The league is owned by the IP creator, the publisher of the game. And they get to decide when they're going to, it was Activision that signed a deal for $130 million to broadcast Hearthstone, Overwatch, and Call of Duty on YouTube. It wasn't any of the teams. The teams didn't weigh in on it. They didn't have a say in it. And then the publisher took half of the money right away. So the economics of these types of things are very different than traditional sports. Believe it or not, an NCAA model works more like esports than traditional sports does, because there is an overseer, in this case, the NCAA. In the case of League of Legends, it's Riot. In the case of, Overwatch, it's Blizzard. But the idea is that there will be some differences in ebb and flow here as to who ultimately is controlling these types of things. And it's good that the big time schools are getting into this, because that's going to force the model to ultimately get worked out.
We're down to the last couple of minutes. One question I thought we could hit before we sort of wrap things up is this point around gender equality. And Will, you made a passionate point earlier about the diverse audience that actually exists for gaming. Here we are, a panel of a bunch of dudes talking about it. I think you were talking about the community that you're trying to shine a light on, but what else maybe you guys needs to be done to connect more broadly with diverse audiences? If brands and marketers want to think about, like, who is this community and who am I connecting to? What else needs to be done across the industry to bring more gender balance to how it's thought of?
Can I dispel the generalization that these spaces are purely misogynistic and toxic spaces? Those exist, but the community is balanced. It's men and women. It's all races. It's the collection of us. That is not as evident in some of the high-level professional teams yet, but that group is coming. Collegiate is very co-ed. And our teams, every single one of our teams has female players. We don't count them and say, well, check out how many we've got, because that's counter to the entire argument that we don't want to be concerned about those things. How much can you learn? How good of a teammate are you? What are your communication skills? Those are the things that make somebody good at team games, and their preparation. And that's not owned by people over 6 feet or, I don't know, former like Greek gods like Darin, but it's this notion that
Former.
Sorry, good point. That these games somehow preclude women, when in fact Blizzard, producer of Overwatch, has more strong what do we call them? Femme fatale modeled characters, right? Every body type, every age group, every ethnicity, and female characters that are the strongest players in the game. And there are more women that play that game because they understand and feel connected to the players. We've got a number of female players, and there's a really, really good question up there. Actually, it was Will's question. Will, I'm giving you credit for a great question. About the line between, actually you misspelled it. You're going for exploitation. You kind of came up with sexploitation.
I did.
Right? Which was wonderfully Freudian. Well done.
Thank you.
That while we want to acknowledge that this is a safe space for women, we can never make that the focus, or we take away the right, and the respect that we've given them by, we haven't given them, that their community bestows on them by not drawing attention to that. We ask all of our female players, there's an interview opportunity for you, but we've kind of cleared it a little bit. Darin knows to not lead with, what's it like to be a girl? who plays games.
I have a friend who's a comic book writer. She's won every award you can possibly win. She created Captain Marvel of all things. And the first question she is asked every time is, what's it like being a woman in comics?
Yeah.
And it's insulting. And
yeah, it's people who
asking
don't
the
know
wrong
enough.
questions. Asking the wrong questions.
They don't know who's there. They haven't done enough work to find out who's really there. So I would say that there's a tremendous amount of gender connection and equality in these spaces, but people are remembering the headline from 6 years ago, 7 years ago about something bad that happened.
If I may, Mike, I said when we all signed on before we were live, I looked at us, and I have deep respect for every person on this call, but the reality is we're 6 white dudes, and Bessie got us started, and I'm so happy to see a woman who brings a completely different perspective from my perspective to this entire experience. And then Bessie gets muted and goes away. And I think that we have to acknowledge this. This is a very diverse community, and meetings like this really ought to reflect that. We really ought to, in the future, we need to get white dudes like us out of the way and make space for non-binary people, make space for women, make space for people of color, because this is a phenomenally diverse group of people, and everybody has their own unique perspectives that they bring to it. And it's not for us to decide what those perspectives are and which perspectives are valid.
Yes, I agree.
You make a powerful point, Will, and thank you, Doc, for yours as well. I think that was a great way to end it. I think we've used our hour. I think it's a shame. I'd love to stay on for another hour and talk to you guys. I've learned a ton. I hope our audience has learned a ton. I really appreciate all of you guys making the time to share your expertise with us. Bessie, anything you want to do to close us down other than to say thanks to all of our panelists and attendees?
Yeah, nope, just thank you. And I think, maybe we have a follow-up and we get some more of these larger community into the conversation. I love that idea. So I hope everyone enjoyed the panel. We really appreciate everyone spending the hour with us. And we will be in touch soon with some of the other content pieces we're having coming out in June and July. Have a good week, everyone.